Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we are going to continue our conversation about Mr. Bill Gates. But before we do that, I want to remind you guys to bookmark my website, theconsciousresistance.com, which is what you're looking at right now. This is the home for all of my content, everything I've been producing over the last 8 years. You can download all my books for free here or purchase them. You can watch our documentaries for free or purchase them. You can also follow us via our email newsletter, which we really highly recommend you guys sign up for the email newsletter. We're back to sending it out once a week now, and with all the censorship going on, it's more important than ever. Also, follow me at Float, follow me at Minds, join me on Hive. Sign up for my text list, guys. I cannot recommend this enough. If you sign up for this text list right here, you will get text every time I release a new video. You can follow the Conscious Resistance Telegram channel. You can also follow us on Library and BitChute if you want to get our videos off of YouTube. And finally, you can support via patreon.com/Derrick Broze. All right, you guys know the drill. I've produced 3 different articles, a 3-part investigation on Bill Gates. I helped push and launch the Expose Bill Gates Day back in June and then August. And remember, guys, every second Saturday of every month, it's coming up. Don't forget about it, Expose Bill Gates Day. And we've been labeled, of course, conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theorists. We've been called far right. You know, people are trying to associate us with QAnon. I know the QAnon crowd likes to talk about Bill Gates and all that, but they don't talk about Trump's, role in a lot of these crimes and things. But because of that, we've had this association with the QAnon crowd. And either way, even if the QAnon crowd wasn't around, just for the fact of talking about Bill Gates, probably going to get you labeled a conspiracy theorist because the mainstream has been totally bought off by Bill Gates. And this is what I pointed out in part 1 of my investigation. My investigation was called Bill Gates' Web of Dark Money and Influence. Part 1 is called Philanthropic Narrative Shaping. And I go into here and cover much of what was already reported in the mainstream. Honestly, I just did a good job of bringing back all the information together and making it one cohesive piece. But the Gates Foundation has followed the same trajectory as the Rockefeller Foundation and other, billionaire philanthropists, quote unquote philanthropists before them, who use their money and wealth to reshape their narrative and to make themselves look like a good guy. And in the process, more recently, buying off all the media. So I covered this back in, when did this come out? Back in May. And we launched Bill Gates Day, June, August. Here we are coming up to September. And finally, somebody in the mainstream is willing to say it. Check out this great piece here, Journalism's Gatekeepers. This is coming from the Columbia Journalism Review. Now, of course, I want to say this doesn't mean I endorse everything on the Columbia Journalism Review, but they are respected in the mainstream. And the fact that this is published there just under a week ago is a big thing. And when you go to Twitter, which you will do in just a moment, and you actually see the responses to this, you see that people are in the mainstream are saying, wow, this is a great job, great reporting by Tim Schwab, and so glad he did this, which is which is a cool thing. I'm glad that they're responding, but just as a personal aside, it is a little annoying to be somebody in the independent media saying these things for years now and calling out people like Bill Gates, and only once somebody in the mainstream club says it is it okay and acceptable. It's no longer a conspiracy theory. But either way, this is a great piece, and it's too long for me to go over here. I really hope you guys will do your own reading. I encourage more reading. Read. Get educated. But this one is, as I said, by author, independent journalist Tim Schwab. Last August, NPR profiled Harvard-led experiment to help low-income families find housing in wealthier neighborhoods, giving their child access to better schools and an opportunity to break the cycle. According to the researchers cited in the article, these children could see $183,000 greater earnings, $183,000 of greater earnings over their lifetimes. And it says, if you squint as you read the story, you'll notice that every quoted expert is connected to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which helps fund the projects. And if you're really paying attention, you'll also see the editor's note at the end of the story, which reveals that NPR itself receives funding from the Gates. NPR's funding from Gates, quote, was not a factor in why or how we did this story, reporter Pam Fessler says, adding that her reporting went beyond the voices quoted in the article. The story, nevertheless, is one of hundreds NPR has reported about the Gates Foundation or the work it funds, including myriad favorable pieces from the perspective of Gates or its grantees. And that speaks to a larger trend and ethical issue with billionaire philanthropists bankrolling the news. The Broad Foundation, whose philanthropic agenda includes promoting charter schools, at one point funded part of the LA Times reporting on education. Charles Koch has made charitable donations to journalistic institutions such as the Poynter Institute, which Gates has as well as to the news outlets such as the Daily Caller. And the Rockefeller Foundation funds Vox's Future Perfect, which reports through the lens of effective altruism. And so you can see that this is not just Gates, though. It's the Koch brothers, it's the Rockefeller Foundation's continuing to fund this. But of course, Gates is a bit more of an outsized role. As they write here, nowhere does this concern loom larger than the Gates Foundation, a leading donor to newsrooms and a frequent subject of favorable news coverage. Now, if you only read one thing, just read this part here, but please do read the whole thing. I recently examined nearly 20,000 charitable grants the Gates Foundation has made through the end of June and found more than $250 million going towards journalism. Recipients include news operations like BBC, NBC, Al Jazeera, ProPublica, National Journal, The Guardian, Univision, Medium, The Financial Times, The Atlantic, The Texas Tribune, Gannett, Washington Monthly, Le Monde, and the Center for Investigative Reporting. Charitable organizations affiliated with the news outlets like BBC Media Action and the New York Times' Neediest Cases funded, media companies such as Participant, whose documentary Waiting for Superman supports Gates' agenda on charter schools, journalistic organizations such as the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting, the National Press Foundation, the International Center for Journalists, and a variety of other groups creating news content, and an ad agency that Gates commissioned to create a, quote, news site to promote the success of aid groups, which is basically just marketing and propaganda. In some cases, recipients say they distributed part of the funding as subgrants to other journalistic organizations, which makes it difficult to see the full picture of Gates' funding into the Fourth Estate, aka media. Now, that is alone right there just highly disturbing. I mean, all those different outlets we just mentioned, these are not kind of inconsequential outlets. This is from Le Monde in France, Washington Monthly, Medium, The Guardian, BBC, NBC, Al Jazeera. So this is a global thing. Center for Investigative Reporting, people who are supposed to do investigative reporting. And again, I want you to read this, guys, because I've covered some of this in my own reporting, but it's good to see it getting covered in the mainstream. Let me just read you one more paragraph. During the pandemic, news outlets have widely looked to Bill Gates as a public health expert on COVID, even though Gates has no medical training and is not a public official. I'm glad he made that clear. PolitiFact and USA Today, run by the Poynter Institute and Gannett, respectively, both of which have received funds from the Gates Foundation, have even used their fact-checking platforms to defend Gates from false, quote-unquote, false conspiracy theories and misinformation, like the idea that the foundation has financial investments in companies developing COVID-19 vaccines. In fact, that is true. The foundation's website and most recent tax forms clearly show investments in such companies such as Gilead and CureVax. In the same way that the news media has given Gates an outsized voice in the pandemic, the foundation has long used its charitable giving to shape the public discourse on everything from public global health to education to agriculture, a level of influence that has landed Bill Gates on Forbes' list of most powerful people in the world. The Gates Foundation can point to important charitable accomplishments over the past 2 decades, like helping drive down polio, also injuring kids with the oral polio vaccine, and putting new funds into fighting malaria. But these efforts have drawn expert detractors who say that Gates may actually be introducing harm or distracting us from important life-saving public health projects like, I don't know, clean water rather than vaccines. From virtually any of Gates' good deeds, reporters can also find problems with the foundation's outsized power if they choose to look. But readers don't hear these critical voices in the news as often or as loudly as Bill and Melinda's. News about Gates these days is often filtered through the perspective of many academics, nonprofits, and think tanks that take Gates' funds. Sometimes it's delivered to readers by newsrooms with financial ties to the foundation. I mean, this is an amazing piece that, again, it's being mentioned in the mainstream. This is not like brand new. We've all said this, but, it does give you a little bit of a good feeling to see somebody in the mainstream willing to step up, and thankful that the Columbia Journalism Review actually published this. The Gates Foundation declined multiple interview requests for this story and would not provide its own accounting of how much money it has put towards journalism. So it offers some quotes, but, we're not going to read those. And yeah, it goes on and on. I mean, this is a really in-depth piece. I just want you to go through and read this. Make the time today. It'll take you 20 minutes to get through this. It's important information. Share it with your friends and family. From the Columbia Journalism Review, this is not a conspiracy page. This is mainstream news, journalism's gatekeepers. Now, as I said, the author is Tim Schwab, a freelance investigative journalist based in D.C. And this is the only piece he's published for the Columbia Journalism Review. But you might have recognized his name because, as I said, I did reference his work in my article here, where he wrote in The Nation magazine. So, and this is one of the great things he mentioned here about let's just cover this from my article, which was sourced by Tim Schwab when he wrote this in The Nation. Let's take, for example, the Netflix documentary Inside Bill's Brain: Decoding Bill Gates. Rather than being a genuine look at the life and personality of Gates, the documentary failed to acknowledge conflicts of interest which might portray the film and Bill Gates in a different light. In a recent explosive investigation examining the reach of Gates' money, The Nation noted that, quote, in the first episode, director Davis Guggenheim underlines Gates' expansive intellect by interviewing Bernie No, described as a friend of Gates. No goes on to tell of Gates reading 150 pages an hour with 90% retention. He's just bragging about how smart Gates is. However, The Nation reported Guggenheim doesn't tell the audiences that Noe, the guy who's bragging about Bill Gates' IQ, is the principal of Lakeside School, which is a private institution to which Bill and Melinda Gates have given $80 million to. And this is the same school that the Gates children also attend. So think about that. They create a documentary. They got some director interviewing a guy going on about, oh my God, Bill Gates reads 150 pages an hour, 90% retention. But they don't tell you that guy's received $80 million from the Gates and that their kids go to his school, the school that he happens to be the principal of. That's just an example of some of the conflicts of interest. And that's the more surface level stuff. And that, of course, was uncovered here in this piece from Tim Schwab, the same guy writing this new article. And I believe his investigation into the Gates Foundation was part of a 2019 Alicia Patterson Foundation Fellowship. So he probably got grant money to investigate them. And that was published in March 17, 2020. Bill Gates gives to the rich, including himself. I recommend both of these pieces by Tim Schwab. I will link them in the description below the video. Again, the new one, Journalism's Gatekeeper, published here in August, and this one, Bill Gates' Charity Paradox, back in March. Those are both important pieces, and I will also link to my Bill Gates piece for those who haven't seen it, because all of those together will give you a clear image of who this guy is. And one other thing I wanted to cover, though, because this is another mainstream article that just came out. It's from the upcoming September 2020 issue of Scientific American, which is, of course, celebrating 175 years of being around and very mainstream and often a gatekeeper of scientific information and trying to debunk things that are outside the paradigm. But let's see what they have to say. Jeffrey Epstein's Harvard connections show how money can distort research. Letting the rich pay for science that interests them is a bad idea, even if they aren't convicted sex offenders. And it goes through here talking about, and this is, again, well worth your time. It goes through talking about Jeffrey Epstein and his connection to Harvard and how much money he gave to the psychology department, how he gave to the program for evolutionary dynamics, and all the different areas that he was buying access to and putting money into the Harvard School for Science and Research. And that's important, right? Because I do think people, it sucks that this happened after Epstein's allegedly dead and Maxwell's arrested, because none of these people apparently had a conscience before them. They didn't care about taking this sex offender, this pedophile, this child abuser's money before we all knew about his crimes. And many of us knew about it, and we were saying, like, hey, why is Harvard still taking his money? But now that it became mainstream, people are like, oh my God, I didn't realize we were taking Epstein's money. My bad. They all knew. And let's just do a quick Control F here, because we're talking about people taking money from Epstein, right? And it's not a good idea to let the rich pay for science that interests them. Well, we let Gates pay for research into vaccines that interests him and that he makes a profit off of. So he seems to fit the bill. Oh, and coincidentally, he was friends with, or at least an associate with, Epstein. But can you guys see this? I don't know if you can see it on screen. I'm Control F-ing Gates, and there's nothing. Gates is not even mentioned in this whole article here. And this person, about the author, Naomi Oreskes, professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Harvard University. Does she have any connections to Gates? I don't know. I haven't really looked into this. It's a short little piece. You can read it. But my point is, like, you write this little article here talking about Epstein giving money and how billionaires shouldn't be allowed to influence science, and there's not even a mention of Gates, who is one of the biggest proponents and influencers of scientific research with his foundation, as well as profiting off that research with his stocks in various companies, and was an Epstein associate, and there's not even a mention of Gates' influence. So just to kind of compare and contrast, here's mainstream reporting on Gates from the Columbia Journalism Review. And again, this is not a defense of the Columbia Journalism Review, just an example. And then here's another example of mainstream reporting on Jeffrey Epstein, Harvard, and rich people influencing science, and not even a single mention of Bill Gates. Not surprising, but I wouldn't be surprised either to find out if Bill Gates has funded Scientific American or some of their associates. That would be something else good to find out. So just wanted to check in with you guys and share that with you. One positive note, somebody in the mainstream is actually speaking up. Shout out to Tim Schwab. And as I did say, I guess we'll do this real quick. If you go to Twitter and you check out Tim Schwab, you can actually see how much support he has been getting. And like I said, this is not just like people like us saying, hey, Tim, welcome to the club. He's getting lots of mainstream support. He doesn't have a huge following, but he's getting lots of mainstream support. There's his article. I've actually sent him a request for an interview to see if he'll talk to me. NYU education professor posted a take on my article, and it's just going on. People are responding now. People are writing their own responses to his article. As far back as 2016, Leone contacted the New York Times about undisclosed financial conflicts of interest in its reporting on the Gates Foundation. She got no response. So they're calling people out now. This is great to see that people are sharing Tim Schwab just keeps retweeting it. And is Bill Gates buying friendly journalism? Tim Schwab once again afflicts the powerful. I mean, again, we've been saying this for a while, but I'm glad Tim Schwab's out there doing it. So, it's good to see. As you can see, there's all these retweets, and these are not just conspiracy theorists. These are mainstream people, doctors, influential people, and organizations who are actually starting to ask a question. And this is important. So I don't really care. Yes, it's annoying when we get called conspiracy theorists when we talk about something and it only gets accepted once it's in the mainstream. But at the end of the day, if it brings down Bill Gates and people like him, then I don't really care who gets the credit. Let's bring down these people. Let's expose them for what they really are. They're manipulating our world, and Bill Gates is doing it through media. He's also doing it through his philanthropy, and his goal is not to save the planet. He does not care about us. He is not some nice, kind guy who's just doing this out of the kindness of his heart. He has other intentions, and those intentions are exposed in my Bill Gates investigation, my 3-part investigation. So I hope you guys will look at the links and see the Columbia Journalism Review. Go back and maybe read the Nation piece. I'll throw in this Scientific American piece, and then I'll throw in a link to my Bill Gates investigation. You guys can get educated on this if you haven't yet. And just one reminder, second Saturday of the month. So the second Saturday of every month is Expose Bill Gates Day. Let me think in my head. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. So 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th. That'll be September 12th. Cool. Maybe you can tie in your 9/11 activism with some Expose Bill Gates Day. But September 12th, second Saturday of the month, hashtag Expose Bill Gates Day. Let's keep it going, guys. He's wounded right now. We can keep exposing him. Now you have a tool that is not a quote-unquote conspiracy theory website to share with your friends. Take advantage of that. Share the Columbia Journalism article with your skeptical friends who think Bill Gates is a good guy. We're going to leave it there for now. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.